Today we are going to build this cool to-do list app inside of HTML, CSS and JavaScript. You can, for example, type in a task or a to-do, and you can add this to-do by clicking the plus button, and it will get added to the end of this list. You can also delete to-dos by pressing the delete button, for example, and add more to-dos if you wanted to. There's a great project to practice your HTML, CSS and JavaScript skills and to add to your portfolio if you wanted to. So let's go, guys. Let's create a basic to-do list app together. Right now we have our index.html, our index.js and our style.css file, as well as an images folder with a background. In case you want to use the same background image as me, you can just go to the link in the description where I will link my GitHub repository and you can just download the images. Now let's start by linking our CSS file by using link:CSS to link our style sheet and use the script tag to link our JavaScript file by using script:module. We say that we want to link our index.js and we use the defer attribute to say we want to load this right before our HTML code. Let's go into our style.css and let's use the universal selector to give a margin of 0, a padding of 0 and a box sizing of border box. Next up, we're going to select the body and we say we want to have a width of 100% and a min height of 100 viewport height. Now we want to use a background image and we will use background URL and we will say let's go to images/bg.png. So now we basically have this background. And for the background we say object fit is equal to cover. Let's also use display flex, justify content of center and align items of center to align everything we have in the center of our screen. So now inside of the body, let's start to create our card component by using .card to create this div. And now inside of this card, let's say we have an h1 that says to-do list, for example. So now we basically have this to-do list right here. I'm going to use a font family for our entire document. And now I'm going to start by styling our h1. And I'm actually, since we will just have one h1, this is all right. And I'm going to say we want to have a color of white, a font size of 40 pixels, and let's use a font minus weight of bold. Maybe it looks a little bit better if we get rid of the dashes as well. And now we have this item. Let's also give our card some padding as well as a background. By targeting .card, let's say we want to have a padding of 40 pixels. We want to have a background of RGBA 255, 255, 255, which is white. And now we say we want to have a transparency of 0.1. So now we get this effect basically. Now we also want to have a border radius of maybe 15 pixels. And let's say we want to have a backdrop filter that will blur the background slightly of maybe 10 pixels. Let's also say that this card has a width of 80% and a max width of 1000 pixels, for example. Maybe we also want to add a border of 1 pixel solid, and now we take RGBA of maybe 255, 255, 255, and let's use 0.3, for example. Now for our H1, let's say we want to have text align of center. And now right below our text, we want to have an input field where the user can input some input and where the user can also press a button to submit the input and add the task to the task list basically. So that is what we are going to do next. So let's go into our card and let's create another div, and this div is a container for our input and our button. So we say we want to have an input of type text, for example, which will basically be the task input and the task ID, and let's give the placeholder add a task, for example. So now we have this input field, which right now looks pretty terrible, but we can change that soon after we've added a button, and inside of this button we want to have a plus icon, for example. So this here has the ID of task, and this one will have the ID of add minus task minus btn. So let's target those two things now. Let's go ahead and say hashtag task, and we'll give our input field basically a width of 100%, a background of maybe RGBA 255, 255, 255, and again let's use 0.1, for example. Also we need to get rid of one of the brackets, and now we want to have a border of 0, an outline of 0. Let's add some padding, top bottom 10 pixels, left right 15 pixels, or maybe let's just use 15 for everything. we're going to use a border minus radius of 15 pixels. We want to have a different text color, obviously, so we're going to use color white, and we also want to have a different placeholder color maybe, so we're going to take our task placeholder to target the placeholder, and we say we want to have a color for the placeholder of RGBA 255, 255, 255, and let's use 0.8 for example, so or 0.6 to get some gray. And now we have this effect. Obviously next to this input field we want to have this button with the plus icon. So we can go ahead and target our add task button and our input minus container, which contains our button as well as our input. So we are going to target our input container by using .input container. We want to have a display of flex, and we want to have align items of center, and we want to have a gap of maybe 15 pixels. So now our button is right next to our plus icon. So we need to style our plus icon right now by taking our add task button. So let's go ahead and say add task button has a background. Maybe we take the exact same background because I think that one looks pretty good. So we're going to save this. We take a border of 0, and now we also take padding of maybe 20 pixels, or we don't even need padding. We can just say we want to have a width of, let's say, 40 pixels, a height of 40 pixels, and now we can maybe go ahead with 43, and now we can go ahead and use a border minus radius of 5 pixels, for example. Now we also want to have a font size of maybe 2 rem, or let's go with 1.6. We take a color of white for our plus sign, or let's use, instead of white, let's use RGBA 255, 255 and 0.6. And now we have this plus button. Obviously we should use a cursor of pointer once we hover over the button. So now maybe we can add some margin to the top of this bar. So we can say our input container should have a margin top of maybe 40 pixels. So now we have a slight margin as well. Instead of 40 pixels, we're going to use 30 pixels. And now let's start to add the functionality to this app. So now we need some JavaScript code. First of all, we have this input field that has the ID of task, and we obviously need to read this input inside of our JavaScript file. So we're going to use const task is equal to document get element by ID, and we take the task basically. And now we also want to check for button presses, so we also need to get the add task button, and we say const add task button is equal to document dot get element by ID, and we want to add a task button basically. So now we will also add right below this input container, we will add a div that has the class of dot task minus container. So right here we will render the task, and obviously we also need to get, or we use this as an ID, and we obviously also need to get this task container inside of our index.js, and so we're going to say const task container is equal to document.get element by ID task minus container. And our plan is now that we're going to enter an input, press this button, and then we'll append our new task to this task container. So let's go ahead and say add task button dot add event listener to listen for click events. And once the user is going to click, we are going to use this input, this task input, and add this task input to our task container basically. And in order to do so, we are first going to create a wrapper div, which is going to have the name const to do wrapper, for example, and we say document.create element to create an element, and we want to create a div element. Instead of this div element, we also want to add a button that allows the user to basically delete the task once he added it. So what we're going to do is now we're going to say const delete button is equal to document.create element again, and we're going to create a button. And now we also need to have the text that is basically equal to the text we entered into the input field. So what we're first going to do is we're going to create a p text. So we say const task text is equal to document.create element, and we create a p tag right here. And now we say task text.text content is equal to our task.value, and task.value is basically the value that we've entered right here. So this is the value of our input field. we take this value and we set our task text.text content equal to this value. And the text content will be part of our card that we are going to add. So what we have to do now is we are going to take our to-do wrapper and we'll append our task text. And right after that, we're going to take our to-do wrapper once again and we are going to append our delete button. And now we also give those variables a class so we can style them inside of CSS. So we say to-do wrapper.classList.add, and we're just going to say to-do minus container, for example. Then we are going to say delete button.classList.add delete minus button. So we're going to add the class of delete minus button to our delete button, and task text.classList.add, and we're just going to say task minus text, for example. We're going to save the document, and as you can see, we don't have anything else, so nothing really changed. But let's just add some text, for example. We're going to click the plus icon, and as you can see, nothing is really going to happen. And the reason for this is because we didn't add it to our task container yet. So now we have to take this to-do wrapper and add this to-do wrapper to our task container. So we say task container dot append, and we append our to-do wrapper to our task container. So we basically take the to-do wrapper that we just created within this function and add it to our task container, which is basically this container right here. So we'll add our items to this div. And now we are going to add a task, like a random task, and as you can see, it looks like this. Obviously it looks completely terrible, so we have to style our text next. But we also first of all need a text for this one. So we can, for example, say that our delete button dot text content is maybe equal to delete, because we already know that this will be a delete button. We add a task and we have this delete button. Obviously it looks terrible, so we can start to style everything right now. First of all, we need to style our to-do container inside of CSS. Then we also want to use delete button as well as task minus text inside of CSS. So dot task minus text, and the third thing we want to target is our delete button. So let's start by using display of flex for the to-do container, justify content of space between. Let's also use a background, and let's just use the same background that we've used for our input field. And we're just going to say, okay, background is equal to this background. So now we have this background. So let's also say every to-do container has a padding of maybe 40 pixels. Or let's use 20 pixels, like so. Let's say we want to have a border radius of maybe 10 pixels as well. And now we also want to say that the color of our text is white. So the text is white right here as well. Now we are going to start to style our delete button by saying that we want to have a background of transparent. We want to have a border of 0. We want to have a color of white. A font size of, let's use 1 RAM, for example. And let's say we want to have a font weight of bold, for example. And let's go inside of our index.html and let's say our text is delete with capital letters, for example, like so. Now we have this delete button. And what we can do is maybe add some letter spacing of 0.1 characters. Or let's try 0.2. And I think this looks pretty cool already. And maybe for the delete button, we're also going to use a different color, for example. So we can say that we want to have the same color for our delete button as for our plus button. So we're just going to copy this color right here, and we give the same color to our delete button as well. And we will remove color of white, and now we have the same color. And I think this looks pretty much all right. So now we also want to target our task container, because this is basically the container. So we are going to target hashtag task container, and we want to say that we want to have display of flex. So now if we have several tasks, we will have them below each other. Now we'll also say flex direction is equal to column, and I will create a gap of maybe 10 pixels. So let's just save that, and let's add a second task. And as you can see, we now have a gap between our tasks, and obviously the entire container should have a margin top of maybe 40 pixels. So now we have those tasks here. We will also add a cursor of pointer to our delete button. So we have this effect right now. And obviously we want to clear the entire input field value once the task has been added to the list. So we can do so by going to our index.js file. And right here we are going to say that this task text, so basically task.value, should be equal to an empty string right now. So let's ask PowerPoint for whatever reason. And now we added it, and as you can see, our task is now cleared. So we can say we want to do some sports as well, and we also want to go to the gym, and so on. But obviously, we also need to make this delete button work, basically. So what we have to do is we have to add an event listener again to this delete button, because this delete button should basically delete the task. So now we're going to target our delete button and say delete button.add event listener. We obviously want to listen to the click function. And once we click this button, what we basically want to do is we want to go to our to-do wrapper, and we will just say to-do wrapper.remove. And now we save this, and now we're going to enter a task, for example. We'll add this task, and now if we click delete, we remove this task. So let's add multiple tasks like sports. Maybe we have to go to the cinema because that is important as well. Now we delete cinema, and as you can see, cinema is deleted. And I think there are a couple of things, especially if we go into the full screen mode, there are a couple of things that we need to adjust. So the first one is that we probably want to give our card a box shadow of maybe, let's say, we are going to take 5 pixels, 5 pixels, 15 pixels, and now let's use RGBA 0, 0, 0, and let's use 0.2, for example, like so. So now we have this background shadow, which gives the entire card some more dimensionality. So let's maybe use 25 pixels right here, 25, like so. And now, especially if we go into full screen mode, we see that our images are basically not that nice because the background is repeating. So what we can do is we set our background repeat property to no repeat. And now it doesn't repeat anymore. We want to have background size be cover. Now it covers the entire background, as you can see. And the width of this to-do lab in full screen is also a little bit too big. So we are going to say the max width is probably 600 pixels. And now it looks pretty good. And now let's also add the background position top bottom property. And now we have this effect. And now this is the finished to-do app. So we can add swimming, for example. We add this to the list. Cinema works as well. Maybe we want to do some coding. And this is the finished app.